President Biden spoke in Chicago today, spinning a narrative that claims success for a once pejorative term he's now embraced, Bidenomics. The president's speech was long on boast, but pointedly ignored the effects of his economic record for the average American who's still suffering from high inflation, spiked interest rates, and the rise in the overall cost of living that we see every time we go to the grocery store or try to gas up our car. Well, joining me now to discuss this and much more, Congressman Dan Bishop. He serves on the House Homeland Security Committee and the House Judiciary Committee. He represents the 8th Congressional District of North Carolina. Congressman Bishop, welcome back to the program. Always great to see you.
Thank you, Tony. I'm glad to see you as well.
So let me just start with this, your reaction to President Biden's boasting about Bidenomics.
You know, Americans have had a lot of opportunity to wonder whether we're living in the same universe as President Biden. I mean, every time I go to the grocery store, go out to a meal, inflation continues. It's not just that inflation, it's sort of cooled from the headlines, and it's not at the record-breaking pace, but this is cumulative, Tony. People who suffered through 8% inflation plus, now we're at 5-something% inflation per year, and it's continuing to mount, and it means your dollar doesn't go as far. People are suffering setbacks economically, and they're accumulative across the Biden administration. How he can tout that as a record of success is a mystery to me. And as you said, I thought your line at the beginning was that most Americans disagree. And that won't serve him well if that's what he's going to rely on in seeking election to another term.
Well, there is a recent poll by the Associated Press and Norwick Center for Public Affairs Research that shows only 34%, basically 1 out of 3 Americans agree that his economic policies are working. That is actually lower than his overall approval rating of 41%.
It's devastating. If there's an area, if you tried to pick out an area he's performed least well, I don't know, you'd have to get into foreign affairs and some other things, but certainly his economic outlook has and his policies, it's been a just massive spending at all points in time. Remember, before the midterm elections, Congress under the control of Democrats, and they spent $6 trillion basically over the course of, they've said it for spending over the course of 10 years on single party votes, and that generated the inflation that everyone's living with, and it continues to be the predominant feature of our present economy, and it's just damaging Americans. And that 1 in 3 figure that you cited reflects that experience.
Congressman, I've been in this arena for some time, bumping up to 30 years, so I know that Americans have kind of a short frame of reference. Unfortunately, they forget and move on. But the economy is one thing that they don't, because as you said, every time you go to the grocery store, you see this, you get sticker shock because your income is not keeping up with the pace of the cost in the rise in living. And so, while we're not paying $5 a gallon, we were at the peak under his policies, it's only down to about $3. And they're touting that as success. I want to go back to what it was before they showed up and we were paying $1.90 or less.
You're correct that people do tend to get accustomed to a particular gas price. It doesn't mean that it doesn't have deleterious impacts on our lives, but you do sort of settle in. But as you say, we haven't gotten back where gas prices used to be. And the thing about the continuing inflation is the shock keeps recurring. It's something, every month or so you're back in the grocery store and you say, well, how did that item get to be that price? And how do I make ends meet? Americans are going to persistently experience that until we go back to what we had solved for 40 years in this country, Tony. We had nominal inflation, very low controlled inflation for 40 years. And that's what Biden's policies has destroyed.
Yeah. Well, so I want to switch gears on this because I think we're in agreement. I'm happy he's running on the economy because it's certainly not going to help him. Let's talk about another topic. You serve on the House Judiciary Committee. Last night, we saw one of the whistleblowers, the IRS whistleblower, Mr. Shapley, go on the legacy media and actually talk about this. So that legacy media is now paying attention to the Hunter Biden scandal. This tells me this thing is starting to get legs.
I think that's true. I don't, you wonder these days, since legacy media seems to be so freighted with bias and alliance with one party, which is to our great misfortune across the board. But does that mean that the policy or the political environment is shifting and President Biden is endangered? I don't know. But I will say this about Mr. Shapley. He is the epitome of what whistleblowers are supposed to be. At every point in time, he has proceeded in accordance with the law, and all of his commentary, everything that he has said has been about what a professional investigation would require and the ways in which that has been stymied by officials under the control of the Attorney General Merrick Garland.
So I want you to walk us through this. You've been tracking this as a member of the on the oversight of the Department of Justice, as a member of the Judiciary Committee. So walk us through this. What is unfolding? What is this all about?
Well, it's all about how the criminal conduct of Hunter Biden has been handled by the Justice Department. And as we know, the Attorney General Merrick Garland, in public testimony, has claimed precisely the opposite of what Mr. Shapley and another whistleblower are saying with regards to the investigation. And that raises questions of whether Mr. Garland has lied under oath. And Kevin McCarthy's commented about this. Jim Jordan, chairman of the Judiciary Committee, will be in the Judiciary Committee where we get to the bottom of that and thoroughly investigate these conflicting claims.
You have the Attorney General in Delaware, the U.S. Attorney in Delaware, Mr. Weiss, saying that his hands were tied. You have now two whistleblowers saying that their investigation was blocked, but you have the Attorney General saying, no, they had free rein. They could do what they wanted to do. Someone's not telling the truth.
That's right. That's right, Tony. Mr. Weiss testified in the Senate that the U.S. Attorney in Delaware, Mr. Weiss, had been advised he had full authority. He could bring cases in other jurisdictions. That's an important point. That he wasn't to be denied anything that he needed, and that he had the pledge of the Attorney General not to interfere with the investigation. He said he'd live by that pledge. But Mr. Shapley tells a different story, says that Weiss could not charge people outside Delaware, that there's another U.S. Attorney, Matthew Graves, that he prevented Mr. Weiss from charging Hunter in another jurisdiction. And he also asked for special counsel status, Mr. Weiss did, where he would have complete independence from the Department of Justice, and was denied that. So these are all very, very troubling things. Mr. Shapley goes on and talks about the ways in which investigative leads needed to be pursued, that at one point the White House was tipped off to a warrant being served against him. There are allegations about an assistant U.S. attorney who consistently hesitated to move forward with actions that needed to be taken in the investigation. So it's very serious. Jim Jordan, I've heard him say now multiple times on TV, I anticipate hearing when we get back from recess, we're going to be digging into all of this, and we need to get these various people in front of our committee or in front of a transcribed interview.
Unfortunately, we're out of time here, but we're just talking about kind of the criminality of investigating crime. We're not even talking about the crime itself, which has links to communist China and payoffs that may have gone not just to Hunter Biden, but to what was described as the big guy.
Right. People have become familiar with that WhatsApp message that has been revealed, where Hunter claims that the president of the United States, not then president, but Joe Biden, was in the room with him when he was threatening, essentially coercing payment of millions of dollars from an agent of the Chinese Communist government. It really is astonishing.
And after that WhatsApp message, $5 million flowed to Hunter Biden, according to reports. Yes, Congressman Dan Bishop, always great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Likewise, Tim.